think it's no secret that the age that we live in has simultaneously been extremely easy with the internet, with AI, with social media, etc. That it's never really been easier to master a skill and then leverage said skill in multiple different ways. Whether that's you're an artist and you sell your art online and you have a YouTube channel so you generate ad revenue, or you have a studio and you hire out space, or you teach people how to make art. There's multiple different ways to monetize said skill. It's never been so easy to learn, master, and monetize a skill and then publish it to an audience or a global audience, really, to elevate your social standing, your financial standing, etc. And yet so difficult in terms of the economic state of the world that we live in, and this fiat currency, this fiat money system that we all live in, because there's no real money. All money is now debt based and based on trust, etc. And I think at the forefront of that is a lot of misunderstanding about what these things really mean. Now, what do I mean by that? Most people don't even know what inflation is. Most people think inflation is the increase in prices, in goods, and the cost of goods and services over time. Whether that's your food shopping or your rent or your petrol prices or whatever. They don't understand that inflation is really and truly what their definition of inflation is actually the effect of inflation. Inflation is really the increase in money supply. So how it works is that the government will spend more money than they make in taxes, and rather than raising taxes or reducing their spending or stop buying so many bombs to drop on innocent kids, and I don't know if that's going to affect how this channel is pushed or anyone's opinion of me, but to stop spending money on certain things, they finance it through borrowing. Now, how do governments borrow? Like, who lends money to the government? Well, first and foremost is the central bank. So the government will issue government bonds, and the central bank will then buy these government bonds, which you can see on the Federal Reserve website, for example, in America. You can see how much government bonds are held by the Federal Reserve, and then therefore how much money they have printed, or not printed, but created out of thin air to purchase said government bonds with. Now, this is a process called quantitative easing, or QE. You can go and research it and do whatever, but I'm primarily going to be talking about the time from when COVID happened until now. Now, why? Because when COVID happened, that year 2020, was the worst and fastest recession, maybe not the worst, but definitely the fastest recession that we've ever seen, the fastest contraction in GDP that we've ever seen. And at the same time, it was a catalyst for a huge increase in money supply, a huge increase in quantitative easing. Now you can see here 24% of dollars in circulation were created from 2020. Now this is old, but yeah, around 25% of all dollars in circulation were created in 2020. So you can imagine how much inflation to the money supply that caused. Hence why we saw this huge increase in CPI data. Now, how do I know that this is inaccurate? Because CPI data is known to be manipulated. Now, how can they manipulate CPI data? Or CPI is Consumer Price Index. In the UK, we also have another one called Retail Price Index, but Consumer Price Index, CPI, is more typically used. So CPI can be manipulated because it's what's known as a basket of goods and services. Now, this basket of goods and services Firstly, they can change the weighting. So maybe 1 year petrol prices represent 10% of CPI, for example, and then the next year it's only 5%. Or they can just completely change the goods and services that are included to manipulate these figures to make inflation look less bad. Now, why would they do this? Because inflation is really the hidden tax, the hidden killer. Fuck income tax. Inflation is the real tax. Why? Because none of us voted for inflation. There was no laws passed regarding it. But we all lose purchasing power, all of us, and it's invisible. It's not visible like how income tax is and how corporation tax are, etc. But all of us now have essentially less wealth. Why? Because the government printed, or the central bank created more money, gave it to the government spent it, inflated our money supply, the value of all our existing currency dropped, which completely erodes the values of our savings and our purchasing power. And it typically hits the middle and the poorer classes, the lower classes, hardest, because they're the ones that hold the majority of their wealth in cash or low interest savings accounts, whereas richer people and the upper classes, which we'll get into later, offset inflation and can counter inflation by holding stocks, properties, businesses, gold, silver, assets with actual value, not just cash, which the only value that it holds comes from the trust that we give to it and the belief that we give that it still holds value. So since 2020, where we can see this huge increase in, like I said, huge increase in government spending, which was financed by issuance of large amounts of government bonds, that over time, with a little time lag, led to this big peak in inflation, which has since come down. And when I say inflation has come down, the year-on-year effects of inflation have come down. Yes, that doesn't mean prices. When this chart goes down, it doesn't mean prices are getting lower. These are compounding on top of what's already happened. Like I said, it's a year-on-year measure, being that January 2023 to January 2024, maybe we saw a 10% increase in inflation. And then January 2024 to January 2025, we saw a 5% increase in inflation. Now that's 5% on top of the existing 10% that happened already. So it's not like inflation is coming down. It's not like prices are getting lower. It's the rate of inflation is slowing. Prices are still inflating. You can go and look on the Bank of England's website and they'll tell you themselves that they target 2% rate of inflation. Now you can work out for yourself how quickly that compounds. Even if we look at from 2003, when I was born, up until say 2024, 2.8% inflation average per year. Doesn't sound too bad, but that's nearly a 100% devaluation in our purchasing power in that time. Now, if we go back to when my parents were born in 1975, you can see how it's significantly worse. Yeah, the rate of inflation was slightly higher at 4.2% average, but that's significantly worse. £100 back then is worth £750 now. It buys you the same amount of stuff as £750 now. That means if you had 10 grand back then, that's 75 grand now. So you can really see how this is the hidden killer. This is the hidden tax, and this is why so many people these days, and you see it all the time in the news, about how young people aren't able to afford, or will never be able to afford a house in the UK and this and that. And you can see, even if you look at housing inflation, the cost of housing, how much that's gone up and how that's gone up even more than inflation. Hence why the upper classes that do hold property are still good, because although their £10,000 then is worth or buys the same amount of stuff as 75 grand now, the house that they bought for 50 grand is now worth significantly more than that 7.5 times increase. House prices since when I was born have gone up 2.5, 3 times, depending on the areas that you're looking at. So these inflation rates are the real koalas, and then the even bigger koalas of how they create these boom bust cycles to essentially extract money out of our pockets in a recession, and then give some of it back to us only to extract more of it again, which is why you can see these, like I said, these boom bust cycles, and how over time the gap between the rich and the poor getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it will continue to happen until something within this system changes. Inflation rates, like I said, started to come down. Why? Interest rates went up. Now, why is interest rates going up a big koalas? Because the government benefit from it. The government don't benefit from it. The government benefit from inflation because they get to repay their debts with money that is essentially devalued. Now, rising interest rates don't really benefit anyone. They make mortgage repayments more expensive, they make loan repayments more expensive, they make credit card repayments more expensive, they make servicing debt, even for the government, more expensive. Now, why does this happen? Because why do interest rates have to increase in order to bring inflation down? Because that's the way that the system was designed to be. Because when interest rates go up, cost of borrowing gets more expensive. Like I said, your mortgage repayments get more expensive, your loan repayments get more expensive, your car finance gets more expensive, your monthly repayments on these things increase. So your disposable income falls, your cost of borrowing rises, both for businesses and consumers, which makes you less inclined to take out a new credit card, take out a loan, expand your business using borrowed money, etc., etc. And at the same time, it increases the reward for borrowing. Now, all this does is incentivizes people to spend less money and take out less credit, and then that in turn contributes to slowing the rate of inflation, what we call demand pull inflation. Now this slows the rate of that, and then what the government will do, or what the central banks will then do, is decrease the interest rates to quote unquote stimulate the economy, which you can see happening now, which is essentially it's essentially a bubble. It's giving people access to cheap credit so that they go and spend more money, and it looks like the economy is doing better. In actuality, this economy doing better nonsense is all financed by debt. And you can go and look at what percentage of the money supply is debt because of the fractional reserve banking system that we operate in. And we'll talk about this more in another video, because I don't want to go too into depth on it. But how fractional reserve banking, and how it's all financed and all serviced by debt. And then what they'll do is eventually, at a certain point, inflation will get too high, boom, increase interest rates again, everyone's cost of borrowing goes up, and who gets hit the hardest again? The people that can't afford to repay their debts, that don't own any assets that are beating the rate of inflation. Now, if we go and look at, for example, the US stock market, we can see from the time of COVID, where we saw this huge drop off, scary, 35% drop in a month when the whole world went into lockdown. And you can go and search up who sold these highs before lockdown, which CEOs and which senators and who had the inside drop. Price came straight back down into previous lows, where the same people that sold the highs were able to pick up these assets, pick up these stocks at a discount, and then profit from what was essentially the strangest bull run in history. Now, why do I say the strangest bull run in history? Because the entire world was in lockdown. We had 25-30% contractions in GDP, a recession, one of the biggest recessions ever. No one was spending money, and yet the stock market was making new all-time highs. Gold was making new all-time highs. Cryptocurrency was making new all-time highs. How? You might be thinking, how? How on earth is this happening? Why? Because all this free money that the government is giving out, all this stimulus, this fake money, fake stimulation of the economy. Like I said, it's all a big koalas, it's all a big game, it's all a big trick. And then all they do whenever they bring out these new plans, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, it's just kicking the can further down the road to push the problem onto the next generation or push the problem to the next recession or whatever. And that's all it really is, because in the recession, like I said, the rich people get richer. The rich people are able to pick up assets on a discount. They buy the property at a discount. They buy the stocks at a discount, like you can see when Trump released information about the tariffs, and we saw this quote-unquote market meltdown of 20%, and we saw the biggest one-day drop in history, biggest 5-day drop in history, big whatever. Who was able to pick up those assets at a discount? Who was able to buy these things at a discount? Who had the money there to buy these things at a discount? You can go and look up how many billionaires were created during COVID. How the poorest individuals during COVID or during that lockdown period lost how much of their wealth, lost their jobs, lost their businesses, saw their businesses absolutely fall through the gutter because they had no customers, and yet billionaires were becoming richer than ever. You can go and look at the top 10 richest people and how much they added to their net worth during that year and a bit period, and then again in the months following. Like I said, the gap between the rich and the poor is going to continue to get bigger. Why? Because, well, firstly, because they're able to leverage their skills, etc., through businesses and through the owning of these assets that are able to not just keep up with inflation, but really beat inflation. Understand that complaining about the system that we live in, or crying about it, or whatever, doesn't change it. Doesn't change it in any way, shape, or form, and it doesn't help you to benefit from it either. Now, the system is not inherently bad. The system is somewhat out to get you, yes. It's designed to exploit the masses for the benefits of the few, yes. I don't dispute that. But if you want to succeed in such a system, the first thing you have to do is understand the rules. Now, I've just broken it down for you ever so slightly, but you really need to do a deep dive into the whole monetary system, the whole financial system, and understand the arena in which you operate in. Understand how are the people that are succeeding in this arena, how are they operating? What are they doing? How are they maneuvering? Like I said, I've broken it down for you a little bit. They buy assets, they hold assets. They are able to beat inflation and all these various different things because they own the means of production, for example, because they don't hold their money in cash, because they have offshore accounts and these things, so they don't even pay tax. So the same way you're paying tax and complaining about income tax being too high and this and that and the NHS not being good enough, they don't even use the NHS. They don't even pay income tax. So you have to understand, like I said, firstly understand the arena in which you operate in, understand the rules that which you're governed by, understand how can you manipulate them and use them to your advantage, like I said, by learning and mastering a skill set and then leveraging said skill set. And it could be anything. It could really be anything. Obviously, I have my skill set, I have my businesses, the next man has his, Elon Musk has his, and so has theirs, and whatever. You choose what you want to do, but understand that exchanging your time for money is probably not the greatest way to do that, because your wages will never keep up with inflation. Your wage increases will never keep up with inflation. So yeah, use it as a stepping stone, yes, but don't necessarily build the rest of your life based on that. Now, with that being said, the link to my free community is in the description, the Vault by Crypty Hustle. Hope to see you there, dropping some more gems like this one. Got a few more videos out on there that I can't necessarily post on YouTube that are more specific to trading, etc., etc. Hope to see you there. Please like, share, subscribe, send to a friend, comment down below. It helps the channel grow. I know the channel's small for the time being, but we're getting there. We'll continue to grow, and hope to see you all shortly. Have a great rest of your week and a great weekend, and an even better next week. Love.